Today's episode is brought to you by Amazon. Please go to lookingbackpodcast.com, click the Amazon banner when you shop at Amazon, and out of whatever you spend, a small percentage comes back to me. It's a great way to help the show out. If you wish to donate to the podcast, the donate button is also on the website. A one-time donation or a monthly donation, either one is greatly appreciated, and thank you for doing so. You also get to help create content when you donate to the podcast, so please consider showing your financial support. We're also brought to you by a company who's not paying me a single dime, but I absolutely love their product, and that company is Kicking Horse Coffee. I bought my first bag last night, and the blend that I got was a dark roast. I'm trying to get back into dark roasts. Again, I haven't had dark roast for a very long time. And they have a blend that I absolutely love called Kick-Ass. And let me tell you something, that's exactly what it does. It's very, very good. If you want to check them out, go to lookingbackpodcast.com and click the Kicking Horse Coffee logo on the front page. When you click that, it'll take you directly to their store where you can see all the different kinds of coffee they have. If you're someone who likes tea, all their different teas they have. They have chocolate, they have mugs and t-shirts and things like that. But check them out. They're a small company based out of Canada, and they make some really good coffee. The Kick-Ass Coffee does exactly that. Thank you for listening, and here we go. We're going to continue our series on Monty Python. We're going to talk about their last movie they did, Monty Python and the Meaning of Life. Let's take a look back.
And now for something completely different.
Monty Python, the Flying Circus.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for listening to another episode of Looking Back. We're continuing our series on Monty Python, and we're going to talk about their last movie that they did, Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. And it's one of my all-time favorite movies that they did. Monty Python's Meaning of Life came out in 1983, and it was the last film to feature all six of their members before the death of Graham Chapman in 1989. Unlike Holy Grail and Life of Brian, the film's two predecessors, which each told a single, more or less coherent story, The Meaning of Life returns to the sketch comedy format of the original TV series and their first film from 10 years earlier, and now for something completely different. The film begins with a standalone 17-minute supporting feature entitled The Crimson Permanent Assurance, which was directed by Terry Gilliam. The group of elderly office clerks in a small accounting firm rebel against their emotionally efficient yuppie corporate masters. They commandeer their building, turning it into a pirate ship, and sail into a large financial district where they raid and overthrow a large multinational corporation before ultimately sailing off the end of the earth. The film proper consists of a series of sketches, which is broken into 7 chapters. The first chapter, the first part, is called The Miracle of Birth. A woman in labor is taken into a hospital delivery room where she is largely ignored by doctors, played by Cleese and Chapman, and the nurses, who are more concerned with using the hospital's most expensive equipment to impress the hospital administrator, played by Michael Palin. The idea came from Chapman, himself a physician who had noticed the hospitals were changing with, in his words, quote, lots and lots of machinery. The second part of that one, The Miracle of Birth, is called The Third World. Excuse me. In Yorkshire, um, a Roman Catholic man, played by Michael Palin, loses his job. He goes home to his wife, played by Terry Jones, and an impossible number of children, where he discusses the church's opposition to the use of contraception, leading to the musical number Every Sperm is Sacred. Watching this unfold, a Protestant man, played by Graham Chapman, proudly lectures his wife, played by Eric Idle, on their church's tolerance towards contraception and having intercourse for fun, although his frustrated wife points out that they never do. Part 2 is called Growth and Learning, and that sketch, if you want to call it a sketch, consists of a schoolmaster, played by John Cleese, and a chaplain, played by Michael Palin, conduct a nonsensical Anglican church service in an English public school. The master lectures the boys on excessively detailed school etiquette regarding the school cormorant and hanging clothes on the correct peg. In a subsequent class, schoolboys, played by Idle, Palin, Jones, and Chapman, among others, watch in boredom as the master gives a sex education lesson by physically demonstrating techniques with his wife, played by Patricia Quinn. Later, a team of boys is beaten physically on the scoreboard in a violent rugby match against the Masters, and the scene then cuts to Part 3, and that Part 3 is called Fighting Each Other. A World War I officer, played by Jones, attempts to rally his men, played by Chapman, Gilliam, Palin, Idle, and Cleese, to find cover during an attack, but is hindered by their insistence on celebrating his birthday, complete with presents and cake. A blustery Army RSM, played by Palin, attempts to drill a platoon of men, but ends up left alone when he excuses them one by one to pursue leisure activities. In 1879, during the Anglo-Zulu War in Natal, a devastating attack by Zulus is dismissed due to a far more pressing matter. One of the officers, Perkins, played by Idle, has had his leg bitten off during the night. The military doctor, played by Chapman, hypothesizes that despite not being native to Africa, a tiger might be a perpetrator. So Ainsworth, played by Cleese, Pakenham Walsh, played by Palin, and a sergeant, played by Jones, form a hunting team, which encounters two suspicious men, played by Idle and Palin, dressed in two halves of a tiger suit, who attempt to assert their innocence through a succession of increasingly feeble excuses to explain why they're dressed as a tiger. In the middle of the film, a woman, played by Palin, as if on a talk show called The Middle of the Film, introduces a segment called Find the Fish, a brief surreal piece in which a drag queen, played by Chapman, and a gangly long-armed man, played by Jones, and an elephant-headed butler eerily challenge the audience to find a fish in the scene. Part 4 is called The Middle Age, and a middle-aged American couple, played by Eric Idle and Michael Palin, heads to a dungeon-themed Hawaiian restaurant at a holiday resort, and they're presented with a menu of conversation topics by their waiter, played by John Cleese, and choose philosophy and the meaning of life. Their awkward and generally uninformed conversation quickly grinds to a halt, and they send it back, claiming this conversation isn't very good. Part 5 is called Live Organ Transplants, and two paramedics, played by Chapman and Gilliam and Cleese, arrive at the doorstep of Mr. Brown, played by Gilliam, a card-carrying organ donor, to claim his liver. He protests on the basis that he's not dead, but nonetheless gruesomely operated against his will. Cleese's paramedic unsuccessfully attempts to chat up Mrs. Brown, played by Jones, then requests her liver as well. She initially declines, but after a man, played by Eric Idle, sings a song about man's insignificance in the universe, she agrees. Michael Palin said in an interview that the scene harked back to Python's love of bureaucracy, and sketches with lots of people coming around from the council with different pieces of paper. In a large corporate boardroom, a businessman straightforwardly summarizes his two-part report on the meaning of life. Firstly, that the human soul must be brought into existence by a process of guided self-observation, which rarely happens because people are easily distracted, and secondly, that people aren't wearing enough hats. This is followed by an attempted takeover of the building by the Crimson Permanent Assurance from the short feature, which is formally brought to a halt by having a skyscraper tip over onto the CPA's building ship. Part 6 is called The Autumn Years, and a posh restaurant complete with a pianist, played by Idol, sings what is called the Penis Song, in the style of Noel Coward. And it's visited by a character named Mr. Creosote, played by Terry Jones, a morbidly obese man in the autumn of his years. He swears at the unflappable maitre d', played by John Cleese. He vomits copiously, consumes an enormous meal and a huge quantity of beer and wine, to the disgust of patrons. After he has finished, the maitre d' offers him a small after-dinner mint. Despite initial resistance, Creosote eats it and then explodes. That's probably the most controversial scene in the whole movie. Part 6B is called The Meaning of Life, and afterwards, two of the restaurant staff offer their own thoughts on the meaning of life. The maitre d' converses with the cleaning lady named Maria, played by Jones, and the waiter Gaston, played by Idol, leads the viewer to a countryside where he was born, and explains that his mother encouraged him to notice the beauty of the world and to love everyone. Realizing that the audience is unamused, he angrily dismisses them and walks off. Part 7 is called Death, and a condemned man, played by Chapman, is allowed to choose the manner of his execution, being chased off the edge of a cliff by a horde of topless women. The next one is a depressed autumn leaf commits suicide by falling off its tree. Distraught, his wife and children quickly do the same, followed by the rest of the tree leaves simultaneously. That is an animated segment. The next little sketch is the Grim Reaper, played by John Cleese, visits an isolated country house, finds himself invited into a dinner party. Not knowing who he is, the dinner guests spend a lot of time arguing with him before finally being told that they've all died from eating contaminated salmon mousse. Palin's line, "Hey, I didn't even eat the mousse," was a rare case of on-set improvisation. Their souls leave their body, and they follow the Grim Reaper to heaven in their automobiles. The guests arrive in heaven, a brightly lit Las Vegas-style hotel where every day is Christmas, and in a large auditorium filled with characters from throughout the film, a cheesy lounge singer resembling Tony Bennett, played by Chapman, performs Christmas in Heaven, while bare-breasted women wearing Santa Claus costumes perform an elaborate dance number. Then you have the end of the film, and the hostess from the middle of the film is handed an envelope containing the miracle of life, the meaning of life, and casually reads it, saying, quote, "Try to be nice to people, avoid eating fat, read a good book every now and then, get some walking in, try and live together in peace and harmony with people of all creeds and nations." And then she retorts that gratuitous pictures of penises and other meaningless controversies would do a better job at bringing the audience into the cinema, and bitterly announces the closing credits. According to Michael Palin, he says, quote, "The writing process was quite cumbersome. An awful lot of material didn't get used. Holy Grail had a structure, a loose one, their search for the Grail. Same with the Life of Brian. With this, it wasn't so clear. In the end, we said, well, what the heck? We've got lots of good material. Let's give it the loosest structure, which will be the meaning of life." After the film title was chosen, Douglas Adams called Terry Jones to tell him he just finished a new book called The Meaning of Life. Jones was initially concerned about the similarity in titles, which led to the scene in the title sequence of The Tombstone, when hit by a flash of lightning, changes from the meaning of lift to the meaning of life. The film was produced on a budget of less than $10 million US, which was still bigger than that of the earlier films. This allowed for large-scale choreography, crowd sequences, a more lavishly produced soundtrack included new original songs. Much more time could be spent on each sketch, especially the Crimson Permanent Assurance. Palin later said that the larger budget and not making the film for the BBC allowed the film to be more daring and dark. The original tagline read, quote, It took God 6 days to create the heavens and the earth, and Monty Python just 90 minutes to screw it up. In the 2003 release of the film on DVD, the tagline says, "It took God 6 days to create the heavens and the earth, and Monty Python just 1 hour and 48 minutes to screw it up." That is actually the actual, when you include the short subject presentation, the Crimson Permanent Assurance, the film is actually an hour and 48 minutes long instead of 90 minutes. The initial release of the film, Ireland banned it, as it previously did with Life of Brian, but later rated it 15 when it was released on video. In the UK, the film was rated 18 when it was released, and on its first release on video, was re-rated to 15 in year 2000. In the US, the film was rated R. As of July of last year, it has a 90% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The DVD also features a director's cut, which adds 3 deleted scenes, totaling 9 minutes, back into the film, making it 116 minutes. The first is the adventures of Martin Luther, inserted after the scenes with the Protestant couple talking about condoms. The second is a promotional video about the British Army, which comes between marching around the square scene and the Zulu Army scene. And the third and last is an extension of the American characters that Idol and Palin do, and they're shown to their room and talk about tampons. That is literally Monty Python and the meaning of life. It was kind of a dark um, movie for them, and that kind of ended Monty Python for them. Um, but they did get back together. They had a reunion, I guess, if you want to call it that, um, in 2013. In November, actually, they announced they were going to get back together. And the original plan was for a live one off show at the O2 Arena on July 1st of last year, within the words of the press release, some of Monty Python's greatest hits with modern, topical, and Python-esque twists. The tickets for the show went on sale in November of 2013 and sold out in 43 seconds. 9 additional shows were added, all of them at the O2, and the last was on July 20th. And they said their reunion was inspired by Trey Parker and Matt Stone of South Park, who are massive Monty Python fans. Michael Palin said that the final reunion show on July 20th would be the last time the troupe would perform together. The event was shown live from the UK nationwide and was titled Monty Python Live (parentheses, mostly), and was later reshown at select theaters in August. Before I finish this series, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about each of the Pythons themselves. First, Graham Chapman. He was originally a medical student joining the Footlights at Cambridge. He completed his medical training and was legally entitled to practice as a doctor. He is best remembered for the lead role in Holy Grail as King Arthur and in Life of Brian as Brian Cohen. In October 4th, 1989, he died of spinal and throat cancer. And at his um, memorial service, John Cleese delivered an irreverent eulogy that included all the euphemisms for being dead from the Dead Parrot sketch, which they had written together. Chapman's comedic fictional memoir, A Liar's Autobiography, was adapted into an animated 3D movie in 2012. John Cleese is the oldest Python. He met his future Python writing partner Graham Chapman at Cambridge. Outside of Python, he's best known for setting up the Video Arts Group and the widely revered through the short-lived sitcom Fawlty Towers, who was co-written by Connie Booth, who Cleese met during working on Python and briefly married. He also co-authored several books on psychology and wrote the screenplay for the award-winning film A Fish Called Wanda, in which he starred with Michael Palin. Terry Gilliam is the only member of the troupe who is not British, and he started off as an animator and a strip cartoonist for Harvey Kurtzman's Help magazine, one issue of which featured Cleese. Moving from the US to England, he animated features for Do Not Adjust Your Set and was then asked by its makers to join them on their next project, Monty Python's Flying Circus. He co-directed Holy Grail and directed short segments of other Python films, for instance, The Crimson Permanent Assurance. When Python was formed, the two writing partnerships were already in place. Cleese Chapman, Jones Palin. That left two in their own corners, Gilliam operating solo due to the nature of his work, and Eric Idle. Um, Regular themes and Idle's contributions were elaborate wordplay and musical numbers. After Flying Circus, he hosted Saturday Night Live 4 times in the first 5 seasons. Idle's initially successful solo career faltered in the 1990s with the failures of his '93 film Splitting Heirs and 1998's Alan Smithy film Burn Hollywood Burn, which was awarded 5 Razzies, including Worst Movie of the Year. He revived his career by returning to a source of his worldwide fame, adapting Monty Python material for other media. He also wrote the Broadway play Spamalot, based on the Holy Grail movie. He also wrote Not the Messiah, He's a Very Naughty Boy, and Oratorio, derived from the life of Brian. Terry Jones has been described as the heart of the operation. Um, the Python biographer George Perry commented that, quote, "You should speak to him on subjects as diverse as fossil fuels or Rupert Bear or mercenaries in the Middle Ages or modern China. In a moment you will find yourself hopelessly out of your depth, floored by his knowledge." And many other Pythons agreed that he is characterized by his irrepressible good-natured enthusiasm. However, his passion often led to prolonged arguments with other members, especially John Cleese, with Jones often unwilling to back down. Since his major contributions are largely behind the scenes, i.e., directing, writing, he is often deferred to as other members of the group as an actor. Jones is important to Python. Um, his importance was often underrated. He does have a legacy, delivering possibly the most famous line in all of Python as Brian's mother Mandy in Life of Brian. "He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy." A line voted the funniest in film history on 2 occasions. And finally, Michael Palin, who attended Oxford where he met his writing partner Terry Jones. The two also wrote a series called Ripping Yarns together. Palin and Jones originally wrote face to face, but soon found out it was more productive to write apart and then come together to review what the other had written. So therefore, Jones and Palin's sketches tend to be more focused than that of the others, taking one bizarre situation, sticking to it, and building on it. After Flying Circus, he hosted Saturday Night Live 4 times in the first 10 years. His comedy output began to decrease in amount following the increasing success of his travel documentaries for the BBC. He released a book of diaries from the Python years entitled Michael Palin Diaries, 1969-1979, and that was published in 2007. There you have it. That is literally Monty Python. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've had a lot of fun talking about Monty Python. I'm a huge fan of them, and yeah. So, like I said, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. And until next time, take care of yourself and each other.